From the studios of Boise State Public Radio News, I'm Gemma Gaudette. This is Idaho Matters. Across the country, many small businesses are facing an uncertain future as they navigate rising tariffs. Now, among those is Grove Fruit Growers. This is an Idaho company that grows mangoes in Cambodia. However, for owner Corey Carver, the business is about more than just the product. It's about the people, particularly those who are part of Cambodia's farming community. And with tariffs on Cambodia set to increase by nearly 50% come July, the Idaho company, well, it's running out of time. So joining us now to talk more about this issue is the owner of Grove Fruit, of Fruit Growers, Corey Carver. Corey, welcome to the program.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
It's our pleasure. So, Corey, can you start out by telling us just a little bit more about Grove Fruit Growers and how you actually got started?
Sure. I'll start with how I got started because there's a few twists and turns to how I actually started the company. My family and I were from Idaho, but we lived in Taiwan for almost 10 years due to the semiconductor industry and Micron. We lived in Taiwan. And my
Hmm.
kids were in high school and they went to Taipei American School. And they were assigned a book in high school called First They Killed My Father. It was about the Khmer Rouge and it was a Cambodian genocide. After the Vietnam War, there was a communist takeover in Cambodia where a quarter of the population was killed. And it was the entire educated class, teachers, doctors, monks. This happened during my lifetime and I'd never heard of it, and reading the book just really shook me. And
Mm.
so we took a trip to Cambodia, took a family trip to Cambodia, and just to kind of see and experience, the culture and learn more about what we read in this book. And so when we got there, we arrived in Siem Reap, and we just saw immense poverty like I've never seen before. And it's like most Americans have never witnessed before. I know I hadn't.
Hmm.
And in rural villages, people didn't have access to clean drinking water. Their kids weren't going to school. They were working in agriculture and selling what they grew in their local market. And there were just massive piles of mangoes just rotting on the ground. This perfect fruit, but with nowhere to go. And I run a small food distribution company based out of Boise that sells dried fruit and nuts into Asia. So I knew when I saw all this
Hmm.
fruit sitting around that I was just looking at a broken supply chain.
So take us then to how all of a sudden you're like, all right, there's this fruit on the ground, as you said, a broken supply chain.
Uh-huh.
Where then does it all come together where you're like, you know what? I can help the folks here, this farming community
hmm
as part of my business. So talk to us about how you got to where you are today.
Well, when I started, I didn't think it would become what it has become. I thought that I would just link them to buyers. These are rural farmers without
Mm.
telephones, without, access to communication. And I thought, I just need to connect them to buyers and I'll be done. I thought that's what I would do. And so I looked online and I saw that there was a company called Infund Development. It's a development company that's based out of Singapore and funded by the UK, Swiss, Australia, and Dutch governments. And they are funded to put in a processing facility in Cambodia and help these impoverished farmers. So I thought if I connected the farmers to infund development, then I would be done. And that's all I would need to do. So I talked to Infund Development. It was actually owned by Americans and by somebody from Virginia who's living in Singapore. And we hit it off, and they liked what I was trying to do, and they wanted to partner with the farmers that I connected them to, and everything seemed great. But then I had the idea of that, they were giving set prices and they were really trying
Hmm.
to help the farmers. And I thought I could expand out even more. And I ended up buying a 110-acre mango farm in a rural village
Oh.
area. And we had set prices. We knew what we could, pay the farmers because we knew what the development company was going to pay us. And so we brought in standards. We brought in food safety standards, put in clean drinking water, and paid fair wages, and to this, brought in farmers and trained them in this impoverished region. So um, everything was going great. And then COVID
Mm-hmm.
hit,
Mm.
and they pulled out of the project, and I still had this farm. So we had all this fruit,
Uh-huh.
and everything just kind of slowed down from COVID. And so what's happening now is a lot of fruit is going from Cambodia. They really don't have frozen processing, and they don't have a lot of processing because they're so underdeveloped. So traders from Vietnam and Thailand come into Cambodia, buy fruit at really low prices. Essentially, they exploit the Cambodian farmers who don't have
Mm.
business sense and can't reach out to international markets. And they bring fruit into their countries, and they process and then sell into international markets. So the traders are making money, the processors are making money, but the farmers are losing.
Mm.
And so during COVID, I knew that I needed to find a new market. And I had an intern that found a buyer in Russia. And so it took me a year. I developed the Russian market, and flew to Russia during COVID and signed a $5 million agreement to buy almost a truckload per day of
Oh my
fruit.
gosh.
So it was beyond just my farm. Then this became more of a national project throughout the country.
Uh-huh.
So we partnered with Cambodian farmers and Cambodian agriculture suppliers and trainers, and expanded the project throughout the country. And so I was happy. We sent our first truckload, and so the supply chain there, they don't how it works now. It doesn't work as efficiently as, say, the US. So what happens
Mm-hmm.
is fruit's driven from Cambodia to Vietnam, up through Vietnam into China, completely through China and up to Russia. That's the best path. And so we sent our first truckload, and it was before the Winter Olympics. I can't remember the year. I'd have to look it up. It was before
Mm-hmm.
the Winter Olympics, and all of northern China shut down. And our truck went into a warehouse and sat for a month and
Oh.
rotted. Because it was fresh fruit, it
Oh.
rotted. So we were
Mm-hmm.
disappointed, and we just talked to the Russians and just decided that after the Winter Olympics, we thought maybe the Chinese government was pushing down, keeping people at home to reduce COVID rates for the Olympics. And then after the Olympics, everything would open up and we could continue the project. 1 week after the Olympics, Russia invaded Ukraine.
Oh
So
my
the ruble
goodness.
dropped, and I'm an American. The SWIFT international wire transfers were cut off, and essentially we had to stop the project. I was so disappointed between
So,
COVID and now this war. I was just
mm-hmm.
it was just really sad. And I thought,
So,
okay, what am I going to do next? And I just decided
so,
to go
so,
into the US market, because I thought, here I have this farm. I put together this network. We have all these farmers relying on us, and this whole supply
mm-hmm.
chain network set up. And I thought, okay, we'll go into the US market, and it's a market I know better. I'm American. It just makes more sense.
So talk to me about how then, after all of this, as you mentioned, you decide to break into the US market. But before we get there,
Hmm.
what difference has this business that you didn't expect to do what you've done with this farm, and as you said, really almost becoming more of a national project for Cambodia? What has this done for folks who are now working in this industry that you've helped, cobble together?
Yeah. So let me give you kind of just a background about what I've put together, and then we can talk about just the different partners that we have and the
Mhm.
impacts that it's made. So I started a company called Grow Fruit Growers, and I went back to school. I got into Harvard, and I have a degree, a master's degree in sustainable global development with a focus on sustainable agriculture systems. And so this was during in between all of this happening. And so my master's program essentially focused on systems thinking, which is a model of how food systems, climate resilience, market access, and development goals align for business, not charity. So this is a business with a charitable bend, because we can't just do business, because how traders are doing it just from a business perspective, and they're exploiting Cambodians, and they don't know about how to apply fertilizers. The Cambodian farmers, they don't know how to apply fertilizers. They haven't learned how to apply them, for best practices to improve their yields. Applying pesticides and harvesting fruit and traceability in the supply chain. There's a lot of it's broken. And so through my systems thinking training, I brought that back to Cambodia and just started introducing and bringing, players together. And, it's important to note that after this genocide, Cambodians were killing Cambodians. And so there's just a real lack of trust within the country. Um, so I think that showing up as an American and having goodwill and putting and working from a market-based perspective and informing farmers and informing the supply chain and building trust, put us in a situation where we the supply chain is just different now than it has been in the past. And so building that with trust, and I guess kind of change the game. So we work
Hmm.
with Anchor Green is one company. They have 300 employees. They do training. They offer training services. They offer international standard fertilizer. So what's happening now is maybe farmers will buy fertilizers or pesticides that are mislabeled, or cheap, maybe cheap fertilizers coming in from China that are mislabeled, and they don't really know what they're applying to their farm, and they don't have the training on how often, the rates that they should be applying. And so Anchor Green, who I'm working with, does training. They have international standard guaranteed fertilizers and pesticides. They have equipment sales. And so they're a big partner that I've used kind of to help put this all together.
Hmm.
I partnered with USAID, which is the US government's agency for international development. They had a harvest program. It was a 15-year, $75 million agriculture program to pay for some of this training, pay for establishing the supply chain, and pay for putting good agriculture practices with farmers. So they really provided a lot of the funding needed to put this project together. I partnered with Asian Development Bank, which is a United Nations group of, I think, 69 countries that are, half of them are Asian and the other half are, Western countries, to fund projects and training. Um, I partnered with logistics suppliers. I've partnered with processors in Vietnam because frozen isn't processed in Cambodia. They're not developed enough yet. So I went to Vietnam and looked at processors and selected processors that meet the US standards. And I selected dried fruit processors in Cambodia. They only do dried fruit in Cambodia.
Corey, what I'd like to turn to now is, as you had mentioned in our last segment, you were just about to break into the American market when the Trump administration put tariffs into effect, and the White House did put a 90-day delay on reciprocal tariffs. I'm curious, what have operations been like during this time?
Sure. So we signed a deal with a processor in Washington for around 1 million pounds of frozen fruit. That's about 2 million pounds of fresh fruit. And we sent about 2 containers of this order before the tariffs hit. So when they hit, we had boats on the water, we had farmers that have been growing fruit, and the operation was, we were in the middle of operation.
Mm-hmm.
And I was on a call with Cambodia and Vietnam, and the Cambodians actually mentioned that the tariffs were hitting, and I thought, oh, they don't know what they're talking about. Then I looked online. I was so shocked. I just couldn't believe it. I was so shocked because the US market is this stable market. It's stable. And so we
Mm-hmm.
know what to expect. And so I was just really taken aback. So we put everything on hold for a couple weeks and just kind of waited to see what would happen. And we found out that the reciprocal tariffs don't go into effect for 90 days, but these 10% tariffs go into effect now. So I talked to the buyers and we just decided to try to absorb the 10% within the supply chain for the orders that we have because they've already promised grocery stores set prices. I've already promised them set prices. We've already set all the prices and all the purchase orders have been signed. And so just adding costs, somebody has to absorb that cost because the retailers aren't going to absorb the cost and put it onto the US consumers yet.
Mm-hmm.
Now they will eventually, but we're just trying to manage
Mm-hmm.
this change. And so because I built a supply chain built off of mutual respect and care, everybody, the farmers, everybody in the supply chain absorbed a little bit.
So you made it work with this 10%, but let's talk about these reciprocal tariffs. If
Right.
this happens, what kind of impact would a potential 49% increase have on your business? Because it's one thing to absorb 10%, it's
Right.
another thing to absorb almost 50%.
Yeah, absolutely. So uh, it's mango is a commodity, and what will happen is it will put us out of business because a 49% tariff, we can't absorb that cost within the supply chain, and retailers won't pay an extra 49% when they can just go to Mexico and pay 0% because
Mm,
Mexican agriculture products were just given 0% with the free trade
mm,
agreement, or I'm not sure how it's working with
mm,
Mexico right now. It keeps changing. But what
mm,
is happening is whenever tariffs get put on one country, it drives buyers to buy from another country or another region. So if those tariffs go into effect, we're done. The US market, we can't sell into the US market. Our prices will be too high.
And what does that do then for all of these farmers that you work with in Cambodia who have been able to, start having, a somewhat living wage, right?
Mhm. I mean, it's devastating. It's really hard. I've shown up and I've said if we put in these practices, they've taken out microloans to pay for fertilizer, the fertilizer that's of standard. They've put in the practices, the standards. They've done, everything that we've asked of them. They've done all the right things. They've paid for extra fertilizer. They've taken out microloans. And then for us to not buy from them, I mean, it's devastating. It's really hard. You know it's just a really hard situation.
Hmm.
It's hard. Yeah.
So, Corey, is it, I mean, it's one of these things where it seems, it's easy to say, okay, this is what a tariff is going to be, right? Either absorb it, move it, give it to the consumer, figure it out. But there are also real people on the ground, like these farmers that you work with, that will feel the the shock of you having to potentially close your business, right? There will no
Right.
longer be there, they won't have the ability to make a living and how you've figured this out.
Mhm.
So where you are right now, is your worry in a lot of ways, yes, your business will close, but so many farmers have depended upon you and your business
Right.
to give them work.
Right. And I think it's a good point that it's not just trade policy and tariffs, it's people. It's people on the other end who've done what they needed to do to get into the market. And these changes are just throwing a wrench in it. And so I think that they won't end up selling their fruit and they won't be able to send their kids to school and they won't be able to pay their microloans back. And it's, I mean, it's devastating. The whole situation is just really
Mhm.
heartbreaking.
So, Corey, where do you go from here?
Oh, well, I'm thinking, I have to process the shock of it all.
Hmm.
And one of the hard things is that the Trump administration keeps changing their mind on tariffs, and it's really hard to make business decisions. So, do I invest in marketing and sales efforts in the U.S.? Do I switch markets? It's just a big question mark, and we're in a holding pattern because I don't know. We've spent so much time and effort in the U.S. market. Switching markets isn't easy. I mean, you have to promote, and you have to go to trade shows, and you have to develop relationships. I mean, it's taken me a couple years to develop the US market. And so with with COVID and then the Russian market and then this market, at some point I just want to be should I just be done? I feel like I
Mm.
should just be done because the cost and the effort, I don't know that it's necessarily a business. There's no business case for it at this point. It doesn't make business sense at all.
Mm.
But then I look at the farmers who are still growing fruit, who are still trying, have put in all this effort, and I think, okay, I have to keep going. I have to find another market, maybe the Canadian market or European market. It's just harder for me because I'm American and I don't know those markets as well.
Mm.
And it'll take, another year or two to develop, which is
Yeah.
another year or two of losses for our company, but also for the farmers.
Well, Corey, I want to thank you so much for coming in and sharing your story with us. We really appreciate it. We've been talking with small business owner Corey Carver about the potential impact that higher tariffs could have on her Idaho company. This is the Idaho Matters podcast. I'm Gemma Gaudette.